The thing that's really confusing for me is that last time, so this doesn't say we're live yet, but last time it started recording us, like when we went back and looked at it, we actually were. So.
Oh, it's already recording during this loading time that says working on your live stream.
Exactly.
Yikes. Oh my goodness, there we are.
There we are.
Dude, we're already on, oh my goodness, chapter 7, which is page 113. Which for 7 chapters, that's some good ground, man.
Yeah, we're flying right through it.
Man.
We'll finish it by beginning next week.
Really? You think so?
Well, I mean, if we keep at the pace of 2 chapters a day, you know?
Look at that progress right there. That's pretty good.
So,
well, again, as always, we're locked in. We are locked in. That's our YouTube channel. And we're excited to be sharing our love for Harry Potter and our love for reading. And both of us, I think Harry Potter was something that was very important to us reading and becoming readers. Wow, there's a bug.
Yeah, it's going to annoy me all night, but
ridiculous.
Do our best to ignore it.
But we're happy to share this with you guys. We are at 20 subscribers. How about that, Jacob? Or Mr. Erickson?
I stand by what I said yesterday. 10,000 subscribers, 24-hour stream.
No. 24 hours. Dude, that's going to be brutal. I mean, we know our 20 subscriber fans are very loyal. One of which is my mother. She's she's been with me, but I don't know if she'd want to be watching us for that long.
I don't think anybody would watch us.
We get some international subscribers, though, so that's worth it, right?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I suppose, anything's worth it. If we get to 10,000, I mean, we won't, obviously. We're at 20. Who knows? We'll see what happens, I guess. But I just can't wait for the people to hold that over our heads. I think that's we have to start making those statements that are so outrageous because we, in our hearts maybe don't believe we'll get there. And then if we end up doing that, then people can just hold that over our heads for the rest of our lives. So.
I don't know about your students, but when I say something like, oh, if we get this many subscribers, we'll make a TikTok, or hey, I'm thinking about if we get to 1,000 subscribers, I shave my head, they don't forget that. It's the same if you promise food. Like, they'll forget, oh, what is the meaning of impervious? What does that word mean? They'll forget that like that. But then when you say, oh, maybe I'll make a TikTok or food, it's like they write it down in like a journal or something. They don't forget. Jacob, what is something that maybe you become an Oklahoma City Thunder fan?
Oh no.
Or you
that is an insult
you
to
put The Last Jedi on your top 5 movies list. Now I'm just being mean. Okay. Anyways,
I hope there's somebody who's watching that knows me and knows how much like I'm craving in my heart. Just to update people who may not know me, growing up in Seattle area, I'm a massive fan of Seattle sports, and the Sonics were my basketball team, and they moved to Oklahoma City, and that ruined my childhood, flat out.
Just decimated.
Every good moment was destroyed by that one.
Jacob's been through a lot after that. It's just losing the Supersonics was just everything.
Yeah, everything downhill from there. Not quite, but and then The Last Jedi. I mean, I have a big love for Star Wars in my heart, but I have a big hatred for The Last Jedi. So there's a cat outside our window.
Oh, it's Rascal. That's our favorite cat.
Yeah.
Your cat.
Not my favorite cat. I'm not a big cat guy, but anyway.
Well, let's get this thing started.
Let's go. Yeah.
We're on chapter 7.
Chapter 7.
Page
Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yes. Okay, page 113. If you're not following along, I don't know what you're doing, because that's what the cool kids do nowadays. Chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. Also, can we talk about the artwork here? Like, what's going on with the artwork? I just think it's funny, but... Okay, chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross.
"The first year is Professor McGonagall,"
said Hagrid. They were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must already be here, But Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small, empty chamber of the hall. They crowded in, standing rather closely together than they would usually have done, peering about nervously.
Welcome to Hogwarts,
said Professor McGonagall.
The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the great hall, you will be sorted into houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has a noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule-breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope that each of you will credit whichever house becomes yours. The ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you're waiting.
Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair.
I shall return when we are ready for you,
said Professor McGonagall.
Please wait here.
She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. How exactly do they sort us into houses? He asked Ron. Oh. How exactly do they sort us into houses? He asked Ron. Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking. Harry's heart gave him a horrible jolt. A test? In front of the whole school? But he didn't know any magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much except Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learned and wondering which one she'd need. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous, never. Not even when he'd had to take a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door, and he sank it now. Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his dorm. Then something happened that made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. What the? He gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room, talking to one another and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget. I say we ought to give him a second chance."
My dear Friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us a bad name, and you know he's not really even a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?
A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around them. "About to be sorted, I suppose?" A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know."
Move along now,
said a sharp voice.
The sorting ceremony is about to start.
Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall.
Now form a line.
Professor McGonagall told the first years.
And follow me.
Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating in mid-air over 4 long tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candle light. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver, mainly to avoid all the staring eyes. Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper,
"It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts history."
It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the Great Hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a four-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. The hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing.
"Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You keep your bowlers black, your top hat seek and stall. For I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your hat the sorting hat can't see. So try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're safe in my hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap."
Just gonna give you a moment of silence.
Appreciate it.
Wow. The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the four tables and then became quite still again. Imagine if a hat got a round of applause. Wow. "So we've just got to try on the hat," Ron whispered to Harry. "I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll." Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted, or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment.
"When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit in the stool to be sworn,"
she said.
"Abbot Hannah."
A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. "Hufflepuff!" shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her.
"Bones, Susan." "Hufflepuff!" shouted
the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Harry. Hannah, not Harry. Sorry, Hannah.
"Boot Terry." "Ravenclaw!"
The table second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them.
"Brockhurst Mandy"
went to Ravenclaw too, but
"Brown Lavender"
became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling.
"Bulstrode Millicent"
then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all, he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked like an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked up for teams during gym at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him.
"Finch Fletchley Justin Hufflepuff."
Sometimes, Harry noticed, the hat shouted out the house at once, but in others it took a little while to decide.
"Finnegan Seamus
The sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor.
Granger! Hermione!
Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head.
Gryffindor!
Shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the other hat over his eyes for ages, until Professor McGonagall jerked it off with his head and said there had obviously been a mistake and he'd better get back on the train? When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, Gryffindor! Neville ran off still wearing it. We should read the whole book in that voice. and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it to
McDougal, Morag.
Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called. Wow, swaggered. And got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now.
Moon, Nod, Parkinson.
Then a pair of twin girls.
Patil.
Then.
Perks, Sally Ann.
And then, at last.
Potter, Harry.
As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking back at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear.
Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh, my goodness, yes. And a thirst to prove yourself. Now, that's interesting. So where shall I put you?
Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin.
Not Slytherin, eh?
Said the small voice.
Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness, no doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor!
Harry heard the hat shout the last words of the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin, he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden, horrible feeling he just plunged it into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the center of the high table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognized him at once from the card he'd gotten out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the hall that shone as brightly as the ghost's. Oh, excuse me. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the nervous young man from the Leaky Cauldron. I didn't know he was young. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 4 people left to be sorted.
Thomas Dean.
A black boy crossed his fingers under the table.
Excellent.
Said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as...
Zabini! Blaze.
Zabini, what a name.
Blaze Zabini, man. He's in the 6th book.
Was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realized how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had gotten to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms opened wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there.
Welcome,
he said.
Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, and here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, too weak. Thank you.
I forgot about that part. He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. Is he a bit mad? He asked Percy uncertainly.
Mad?
Said Percy airily.
He's a genius! Best wizard in the world. But he is a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry?
Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He had never seen so many things he liked to eat on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, fries, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and for some strange reason, peppermint humbugs. That food sounds so good. Oh, now I'm hungry. Dang it. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always taken to anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything except the peppermints and began to eat. It was all delicious.
That does look good.
Well, the bug is back, said the ghost in the rough sadly, watching Harry cut up his steak. Can't you...
No, I haven't eaten for nearly 500 years,
said the ghost.
I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Poppington at your service, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower.
I know who you are, said Ron suddenly.
Right in my ear, sorry.
Yeah, dude did the same thing to me. My brothers told me about you. You're nearly headless Nick.
I would prefer if you call me Sir Nicholas de Mimsy.
The ghost began stiffly, but sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted.
Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless?
Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted.
Like this? He said irritably.
He seized his left ear and pulled. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. Someone had obviously tried to behead him, but not done it properly. Looking pleased at the stunned looks on their faces, nearly headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck, coughed, and said,
So, new Gryffindors, I hope you're going to help us win the House Championship this year. Gryffindors have never gone so long without winning. Slytherins have gotten the cup 6 years in a row now. The Bloody Baron's becoming almost unbearable. He's the Slytherin ghost.
Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there. With blank staring eyes, a gaunt face, and robes stained with silver blood, he was right next to Malfoy, who, the bug, Harry was pleased to see, didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements.
How did he get covered in blood?
Asked Seamus, with great interest.
I never asked,
said nearly headless Nick, delicately. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food faded from the plates, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later, the desserts appeared. Blocks of ice cream in every flavor you could think of, apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs, and jam donuts, trifle, strawberries, jello. Why do they have jello? Rice pudding. As Harry helped himself to a treacle tart. Do you think that's how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
I feel like it's wrong. Treacle tart.
That's how I've always pronounced it, at least. If it's wrong, then
Guess it's wrong. The talk turned to their families.
I'm half and half,
said Seamus.
My dad's a muggle. Mum's a witch. Didn't tell him she was a witch until after they were married. Bit of a nasty talk for him.
The others laughed. What about you, Neville? Said Ron.
Well, my gran brought me up and she's a witch.
Said Neville.
But the family thought I was all muggle for ages. My great uncle Algie kept trying to catch me off guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of Blackpool Pier once. I nearly drowned. But nothing happened until I was 8. Great Uncle Algie came round for dinner, and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by my ankles when my great aunt Enid offered him some meringue. Offered him a meringue, and he accidentally let go. But I bounced all the way down the garden and into the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying, she was so happy. And you should have seen their faces when I got in here. They thought I might not have enough magic to come, you see. Great Uncle Algy was so pleased that he bought me my toad.
On Harry's other side, Percy Weasley and Hermione were talking about lessons.
I do hope they saw it right away. There's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiguration, you know. Turning something into something else. Of course. It's supposed to be very difficult. You'll be starting the small matches into needles and that sort of thing.
Harry, who was starting to feel warm and sleepy, looked up at the high table again. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, was talking to a teacher with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. It happened very suddenly. The hook-nosed teacher looked past Quirrell's turban, stared into Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. Ouch! Harry clapped a hand to his head.
What is it?
Nothing. The pain had gone as quickly as it had come. Harder to shake off was the feeling Harry had gotten from the teacher's look, a feeling that he didn't like Harry at all. Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell? He asked Percy.
Oh, you know Quirrell already, don't you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about the Dark Arts, Snape.
Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look at him again. At last, the desserts too disappeared, and Professor Dumbledore got to his feet again. The hall fell.
To give you. First years should note that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all pupils. And a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well.
Got a bug. Oh goodness, I lost my spot by killing that bug.
Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction.
Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction of the Weasley twins.
I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their houses should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year the third floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death.
Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. He's not serious, he muttered to Percy.
Must be,
said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore.
It's odd, because he usually gives us a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere. Forest full of dangerous beasts, everyone knows that. I do think he might have told us prefects, though. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song, cried Dumbledore.
Harry noticed that the other teachers' smiles had become rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick as he was trying to get a fly off the end, just like we're trying to. And a long golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the tables and twisted itself, snake-like, into words.
Everyone pick your favorite tune,
said Dumbledore.
And off we go!
And the school bellowed.
We gotta do this together, Stephen.
Okay.
Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy, Hoggy, Hogwarts, teach us something, please. Whether we be old and bald or young with scabby knees, our heads could do with filling with something interesting stuff.
Some interesting stuff.
But now they're bare and full of air, dead flies and bits of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing, bring back what we forgot. Just do your best, we'll do the rest, and learn until our brains all rot. Heck yeah.
That was excellent. That was worthy of some knocks. Anyways, everybody finished the song at different times. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing along to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted their last few lines with his wand, and when they had all finished, he was one of those who clapped loudest.
Ah, music,
he said, wiping his eyes.
A magic beyond all we do now. All we do here. And now bedtime. Off you trot!
The Gryffindor first years followed Percy through the chattering clouds, out of the great hall and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the portraits along the corridors whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy led them through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircases, yawning and dragging their feet, and Harry was just wondering how much farther they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks was floating in midair ahead of them, and as Percy took a step toward them, they started throwing themselves at him.
Peeves,
Percy whispered to the first year.
A poltergeist.
He raised his voice.
Peeves, show yourself!
A loud, rude sound like the air being let out of a balloon answered.
Do you want me to go get the Bloody Baron?
There was a pop, and a little man with wicked, dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged in the air, clutching the walking sticks.
Ooh!
He said with an evil cackle.
It go firsties, what fun!
He swooped suddenly at them. They all ducked.
Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it,
Barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking sticks on Neville's head. They heard him zooming away, rattling coats of armor as he passed.
You want to watch out for Peeves,
said Percy, as they set off again.
The Bloody Baron's the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us prefects. Here we are.
At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait.
Caput Draconis,
said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up, and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cozy, round room full of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory, and the boys through another. At the top of a spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their beds at last. 5 four-posters hung with deep red velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. "Great food, isn't it?" Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. "Get off, Scabbers! He's chewing my sheets!" Harry was going to ask Ron if he'd had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once, because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be a Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully. And there was Malfoy, laughing at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy turned into the hook-nosed teacher, Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke, sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again, and when he woke the next day, he didn't remember the dream at all. But we do. We remember.
Yeah.
Never forget.
All right, moving right along here. Chapter 8. The Potions Master. There, look! Where?
Next to the tall kid with the red hair.
Wearing the glasses.
Did you see his face?
Did you see his scar? Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory the next day. People lining up outside classrooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or doubled back to pass him in the corridors again, staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then, there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely. Oh, almost got the fly, but not quite.
So close. It's going to be impressive when you do.
Or tickled them in exactly the right place. And doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls, just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the portraits kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armor could walk. The ghosts didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point Gryffindors in the right direction, but Peeves the Poltergeist was worth 2 locked doors and a trick staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up right behind you invisible, grab your nose and screech, "Got ya, conk!" Even worse than Peeves, if it was possible, was the caretaker, Argus Filch. Harry and Ron managed to get on the wrong side of him on the very first morning. Filch found them trying to force their way through a door that unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds corridor on the 3rd floor. Ah, rats. This is
a dramatic pause that worked out.
Yeah, I guess so. He wouldn't believe they were lost, was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose, and was threatening to lock them inside the dungeons when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing by. Filch owned a cat called Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dust-colored creature with bulging lamp-like eyes just like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors alone. Got on my water bottle, that's not cool.
That's messed up, Fly.
Gosh, unreal.
It's named Peeves, because Peeves gets in people's business.
Yeah, you're right.
I love Peeves.
She patrolled the corridors alone, break a rule right in front of her, put just one toe out of line, and she'd whisk off for Filch, who'd appear wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the secret passageways of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as suddenly as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to give Mrs. Norris a good kick. And then, once you had managed to find them, there were the classes themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight, and learn the names of different stars and the movements of their planets. 3 times a week they went out to the greenhouses behind the castle to study herbology, with a dumpy little witch called Professor Sprout, where they learned how to take care of all the strange plants and fungi. And found out what they were used for.
I think fungi sounds kind of cool, though.
Easily the most boring class was History of Magic, which was the only one taught by a ghost. Professor Binns had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire, got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Binns droned on and on while they scribbled down names and dates, and got Emmerich the Evil and Ulrich the Oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of their first class, he took roll call, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. "Education is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts," she said. "Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned." She changed her desk into a pig, and then back again.
Imagine your desk turning into a pig, dude.
Man, almost got it.
Can you imagine that? Like, the desk is boom, pig.
That'd be fun. I'd be down for that.
All your stuff would get it. Anyway, sorry.
That's a good point. Does the contents of the desk, are they inside the guts of the pig?
Like drawers. Do you have, like, pig drawers now? Does the tail...
Obviously, J.K. Rowling didn't think about that.
We need discussion questions like this. Really, like, the pressing questions that people... Who knows that, though, about Harry Potter? No one.
I'm sure that there's an answer somewhere.
We're scholars.
Honestly.
We are scholars.
They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing furniture into animals for a long time. After taking a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and trying to turn it into a needle. By the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made a difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone, all silver and pointy, and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone had been looking forward to was Defense Against the Dark Arts, but Quirrell's lessons turned out to be a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off the vampire he met in Romania, and was afraid of coming back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie. But they weren't sure that they believed this story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Quirrell had fought off the zombie, Quirrell went pink and started talking about the weather. For another, They noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it must be stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was very relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from Muggle families, and, like him, hadn't any idea they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down to the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once.
Hey, what have we got today?
Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge.
Double potions with Slytherins,
said Ron.
Snape's head of Slytherin House. They say he always favors them. We'll be able to see if it's true. Wish McGonagall favored us,
said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor House, but it hadn't stopped her from giving them a huge pile of homework just the day before. Just then the mail arrived. Harry had gotten used to this by now, but it had given him a bit of a shock on the first morning, when about 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the Great Hall during breakfast, circling the tables until they saw their owners, and dropping letters and packages onto their laps. Hedwig hadn't brought Harry anything so far. She sometimes flew in to nibble on his ear and have a bit of toast before they were going off to sleep in the owlery with the other owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped a note into Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. It said, in very untidy scrawl, "Dear Harry, I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would you like to come and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I want to hear all about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's quill and scribbled, "Yes, please, see you later," on the back of the note, and sent it off with Hagrid again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because Potions' lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the start of term banquet, Harry had gotten the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of their first potion lesson, he knew that he'd been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. Potions lessons took place down in one of the dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle, and it would have been quite creepy enough without the pickled animals floating in glass jars all around the walls. Snape, like Flitwick, started class by taking roll call, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter, our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty and made you think of dark tunnels. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent without an effort. "As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through the human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even put a stopper in death. If you aren't as bunch of dunderhands as I usually have to teach." More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat, looking desperate to prove herself that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape suddenly, "what would I get if I added powdered root to asphodel in an infusion of wormwood?" Powdered root of an infusion of what? Harry glanced over to Ron, who looked as stumped as he was. Hermione's hand shot up into the air.
"I don't know, sir," said
Harry. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Tut, tut. Fame clearly isn't everything." He ignored Hermione's hand. Let's try again, Potter. Where would you look if I told you to find me a Bezoar? Hermione stretched her hand as high into the air as she could without leaving her seat, but Harry didn't have the faintest idea what a Bezoar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who were shaking with laughter.
I don't know, sir.
Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, eh, Potter? Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had looked through his books at the Dursleys, but did Snape expect him to remember everything in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Hey! Whoa. Hiccup.
Funky.
Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. What's the difference, Potter, between Monkshood and Wolfsbane? At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching towards the dungeon ceiling.
I don't know,
said Harry quietly.
I think Hermione does, though. Why don't you try her?
A few people laughed. Harry caught Seamus's eye, and Seamus winked. Snape, however, did not look pleased. Sit down, he snapped at Hermione. For your information, Potter, Sfurdle and Wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the Draught of Living Death. A Bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat, and it will save you from most poisons. As for Monkshood and Wolfsbane, they are the same plant, which also goes by the same aconite. Well, why aren't you all writing this down? There was a sudden rummaging for quills and parchment. Over that noise, Snape said, and a point will be taken from Gryffindor House for your cheek, Potter. That didn't improve for Gryffindor as potion lessons continue. Snape put them all into pairs and set them into mixing up a simple potion to cure boils. He swept around in his long black cloak, watching them weigh dried needles and crush snake fangs, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he'd seemed to like. He was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy had stewed his horned slugs, when a cloud of acid green smoke and loud hissing filled the dungeon. Neville had somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron into a twisted blob, and their potion was seeping across the stone floor, burning holes into people's shoes. Within seconds, the whole class was standing on their stools, while Neville, who had been drenched in the potion when the cauldron collapsed, moaned in pain as angry red boils sprang all over his arms and legs. "Idiot boy!" snarled Snape, clearing the spilled potion away with one wave of his wand. "I suppose you added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire." Neville whimpered as boils started to pop all over his nose. "Take him up to the hospital wing," Snape spat at Seamus. Then he rounded on Harry and Ron, who had been working next to Neville. "You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Thought he'd make you look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor." That was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him in the back of behind the cauldron.
"Don't push it,"
he muttered.
I've heard.
Why did Snape hate him so much?
"Cheer up,"
said Ron.
"Snape's always trying to take points off Fred and George. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you?"
At 5 to 3, they left the castle and made their way across the grounds. Hagrid lived in a small wooden hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of galoshes.
Let's just say it.
Galoshes.
Boom, that's it.
That's what it is.
Yep.
We're outside the front door. When Harry knocked, they heard a frantic scrabbling from inside and several booming barks. Then Hagrid's voice rang out, saying, "Back, Fang, back." Hagrid's big, hairy face appeared in the crack as he pulled the door open. "Hang on," he said. "Back, Fang." He let them in, struggling to keep a hold on the collar of an enormous black boarhound. There was only one room inside. Hams and pheasants were hanging from the ceiling. A copper kettle was boiling on the open fire, and in the corner stood a massive bed with patchwork quilt over it. "Make yourselves at home," said Hagrid, letting go of Fang, who bounded straight to Ron, licking his ears Like Hagrid, Fang was clearly not as fierce as he looked.
This is wrong.
Harry told Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water into a teapot, and putting rock cakes over a plate. "Ah, another Weasley, eh?" said Hagrid, glancing at Ron's freckles. "I spent half my life chasing your twin brothers away from the forest." The rock cakes were shapeless lumps, and with raisins that almost broke their teeth. But Harry and Ron pretended to be enjoying them, as they told Hagrid about their first lessons. Fang rested his head on Harry's knee and drooled all over his robes. Harry and Ron were delighted to hear that Hagrid called Filch "that old git. And as for that cat, Mrs. Norris, I'd like to introduce her to Fang sometime. You know, every time I go up to the school, she follows me everywhere. Can't get rid of her. Filch puts her up to it." Harry told Hagrid about Snape's lesson. Hagrid, like Ron, told Harry not to worry about it, that Snape liked hardly any of the students.
"But he seemed to really hate me."
"Rubbish," said Hagrid. "Why should he?" Yet Harry couldn't help thinking that Hagrid didn't quite meet his eyes when he said that. "How's your brother Charlie?" Hagrid asked Ron. "I liked him a lot. Great with animals." Harry wondered if Hagrid had changed the subject on purpose. While Ron told Hagrid all about Charlie's work with dragons, Harry picked up a piece of paper that was lying on the table under the tea cozy. It was a cutting from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts break-in latest. Investigations continue into the break-in in Gringotts on 31st July. Widely believed to be the work of a dark wizard or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched. Oh man, this fly is so annoying. Goodness gracious.
There's a fly buzzing around. My goodness.
The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied that same day. But you're not telling me what was in there, But we're not telling you what was in there, so keep your noses out of it if you know what's good for you," said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. Harry remembered Ron telling him on the train that someone had tried to rob Gringotts, but Ron hadn't mentioned the date.
"Hagrid,"
said Harry.
"that Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while we were still there."
There was no doubt about it. Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eyes this time. He grunted and offered him another rock cake. Harry read the story again. The vault that was searched, in fact, had been emptied that same day. Hagrid emptied a vault 713. If you could call it emptying, taking out one grubby little package. Had that been what the thieves were looking for? As Harry and Ron walked back to the castle for dinner, their pockets weighed down with rock cakes that they'd been too polite to refuse. Harry thought that none of the lessons he'd had so far had given him as much to think about as tea with Hagrid. Had Hagrid collected that package just in time? Where was it now? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry? Find out next time.
That was so fast. Yesterday was what? An hour and a half?
Yesterday was an hour and a half. This one I think
40 minutes, right?
55, yeah. Yeah, but we'll so Stephen, I believe tomorrow won't be here. Is that correct?
It's sad. But even though I won't be here just tomorrow, I'll be back on Thursday.
Yeah.
But what is the good news in this for tomorrow?
Good news is that there will still be reading. There have been two people who I reached out to help to read with me. Both of them said yes. So that puts me in a position where, or not both of them said yes. One of them said yes. One of them didn't respond. I guess so. I should rephrase that sentence.
So one of them can do it.
One of them can do it. One of them maybe can do it. But so maybe we have 3 people. Maybe we have 1 person. Maybe it ends up just being me. I don't know.
Maybe there's 10 people all in this small space. Imagine that 10 people, 24-hour marathon reading tomorrow.
Well, I feel
Let's
like
promise
that probably won't happen.
You should do the 24-hour when I'm gone. And then we'll keep reading when I'm back on Thursday.
Nope.
Dude, that's a great idea. Let's go.
I said
24-hour live stream. Smash the like button. Subscribe tomorrow.
Yeah, if we get 10,000 subscribers between now and 6:30 tomorrow, then yeah, heck yeah. That's not going to happen, I'm sure. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it. We had a great time. Harry Potter was a blast.
Yeah, and this is so much fun for us. I hope you can tell, and I think I laugh at so many of Mr. Erickson's jokes, but we're at least having a great time. So thanks for tuning in, either live or on the recorded videos.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time for the next few chapters.
See you next time, everyone.